Welcome to Lair the Alchemist, and welcome to another edition of Sabbath Sunday. This is where Darin and I get together with you to discuss all things Black Sabbath. And on today's episode, we are going to be discussing the recently released Live Evil box set. This box comes with a 40-page hardcover book, a poster, a reproduction of the Mob Rules era tour program. We're not going to look at those. There's plenty of unboxing videos on the internet if you want to see people flipping through, showing you all those. But we're going to be focusing on the music that you get inside here. And what you get is the Live Evil album remastered. This is a reproduction of the original album, gatefold and everything, with one notable exception. On the back, Ronnie is listed as Ronnie James Dio, whereas on the original vinyl they had him listed as Ronnie Dio, something they it spitefully, as Ronnie always used Ronnie James Dio as his his stage name. And Vinny Appice and Jeff Nichols are not listed as, I believe they were listed as special thanks or something like that on the original album. So this is a remaster, but you also get a 40th anniversary remix of the album. Now, I did a video a while ago on the difference between a remix and a remaster. I'll leave that linked down below. Just to summarize, a remaster, you are taking the already finished product and EQing it, adding a little something here and there to it as far as frequencies and maybe some other studio gimmickry type stuff. Think of it like a picture. It's like adding filters to a picture that's already been taken. If the picture is blurry and out of focus, there's only so much you can do later on to try to correct that. A remix, they actually go back to the original source and they can adjust levels, change tones, change where something sits in the stereo field. So it's a completely different approach than a remaster. So, okay, Darin, the Live Evil 40th anniversary box set. What are your thoughts on it?
Well, I mean, I wasn't really that excited about it. It wasn't one of the ones I was hoping to get. We've talked about the box sets countless times. When are they coming out? What's going to be the next one? And the next one was Live Evil. I read about it, I think probably about a month before it was due to drop. And take what you can get when you can get it. So here we are. Oddly enough, talking about the Live Evil box set. And I'm not sure. Maybe it's because of the Dio documentary. Maybe they're capitalizing on some of the popularity of Dio, and also the Rhino has, I believe it was Rhino, re-released Holy Diver
Yeah.
remix version. But as far as the Live Evil box set, I like it. It's like all the other box sets. It's chock full of goodies. We've got a poster, tour book, hardbound book, and then we've got the remaster and the remix. The remix is really good. I think it actually makes Live Evil finally sound like a live album. There's more live ambiance. It's not perfect. It's still lacking a little bit of the live ambiance, but it's certainly improved over the original. Also, it's very noticeable that Vinny's drums have come up higher in the mix. They're more audible. I'm not sure if Dio's voice is more audible, but it's placed better in the mix. Everything around Dio's voice has a more logical placement in the mix, which makes things sound more evened out. I always felt, as before the original mix of Live Evil, that Dio was rather loud, and Tony was sort of second loudest, but I'm not sure if he was pan center, but those two elements really, I think, dominated the mix. And then you could kind of hear the bass and you kind of hear the drums, but not enough to really make it sound like a full live recording. Well, that's been corrected, and it does sound like a full live recording. So I'm very pleased about that. As far as the remaster goes, Rhino put out a really good remaster of Live Evil in 2009. So I've been pretty content with that. This was redone recently by Andy Pearson. I'm really not crazy about Andy Pierce's remasters. I don't like what he did on the second installment of the Rhino Black Sabbath remaster. So I mean, it's kind of hit or miss, but overall, I'm not really that impressed with him. I think and I've said this before, there was the 2009 to 2011 Chris Bellman analog cuts to vinyl, I think, are far superior. That's my general go-to versions of these. And the Live Evil 2009 was part of that series of the Chris Bellman cuts. So that sounds good. And I think it sounds better than the version that's in the box set, at least to my ears. So I'm not crazy about the remaster in the box set, but I really like the remix. I think it was a good decision to do that, because I think we've got an improved live album that actually sounds like a live album, where it always should have been to begin with. So, like I said, to the whole package is again, it's one of those things where, you know, it's expensive, and if you already have the album, you may not feel like you really need to buy it. But I would say in the case of Live Evil, unless you really like the way it originally sounded, you might want to save your pennies, or, you know, break open the piggy bank and get this if you're a fan of the album, because I think you'll be surprised, and I think you'll be impressed by the way that this remix sounds. I think it really adds new life to it. So that's where I am.
Yeah, for me, this whole set is all about the remix. I don't really think the remaster is anything special. It doesn't sound that much different to me than, you know, some of the previous ones. For disclosure, I just got my box set last night. I've listened to the vinyl once time through, but I've listened to the remix probably a dozen times on Apple Music, and Apple has a high-res version of the album, as well as it's an Apple digital master. So what that means is that, because I've heard some people complaining that the remix is a little clipped out and there's some digital distortion here and there, Apple digital masters usually eliminate all that stuff. So disclosure, when I talk about the remix, I'm mostly referencing the vinyl or the Apple streaming version. But also on Apple, you have the two other versions of Live Evil, two other mixes, you know, before this remaster. And to me, it sounds a little different, but it's nothing that much. So for me, this is all about the remix. And the problem when you have a one guitar band and you make a live album in a studio, the guitar player can overdub as many guitars as they want to fill out the stereo spectrum. In a live setting, well, what do you do in that situation? Well, what they did with the original Live Evil is everything is dead center. It sounds like it's mono. Guitar, bass, drums, vocals, they're all dead center. And there's almost no sense of stereo spread to the whole thing. Because usually the dilemma is, well, if you only got one guitar, what goes on in the other speaker? Listen to the first so many Van Halen records. Eddie's panned heavy one side and the bass is panned heavy the other. And if you're just listening in a room, you don't really notice it. But if you have headphones on, it's a little strange. So for the remix, to me, this remix breathes a whole new life into this album. It reminds me of what was in the Volume 4 box set. They didn't call it Live at Last, but it was the Live at Last show remixed. This breathes whole new life into this thing for me. They move Iommi from center to the right. His guitar in the stereo spectrum, his guitar sounds huge to me, sounds way better than it did on the original. Ronnie is right in the middle. The drums are right in the middle. The drums to me sound much clearer, much bigger. Ronnie, who may not necessarily be louder in the mix, but he's clearer in the mix. The fact that they've added crowd noise to it. Also, I forgot to mention at the beginning of this, Darin and I, with our podcast, we did a whole episode on Live Evil. So you can listen to us go really in depth into Live Evil from a previous podcast. one of the things we mentioned in the podcast that I found really disappointing was it didn't feel like a live album because the crowd sounded so far away. I remember when I was little, I thought, oh, it's because they're playing in a football stadium and the crowd is like, 50 yard at the 50-yard line or something. Well, here, the crowd, like when E5150 starts at the beginning, in fact, it starts with crowd noise and then E5150 sort of fades in and you hear the crowd, like getting excited as this thing's playing. And to me, it's like you didn't have that on the original. This makes it feel so much more live when Ronnie does his, sing along in Heaven and Hell and just between songs. And because of this more open sonic space to everything, it just sounds and feels so much more live. And there's also a lot of little subtle things that either they weren't in the original mix or they were so low you couldn't hear them. For instance, when in the song Black Sabbath, at the end of every phrase, there's like a delay or like a reverb or something that they have on Ronnie's voice in the remix, which makes it sound super cool. What is this that stands before me? Just like sound that sort of goes out. That's just like, wow, it really changes the feel of the song. Same thing with Iommi's solo in Heaven and Hell, when the band's jamming underneath them and he's doing all those things with like the delays and the guitar sounds reverberating off of each other. And it just sort of fills out the stereo mix and it just sounds so much better. They've added a bunch of the stage banter between songs, I think is really cool. Which again makes it feel more like a live record, like the way Ronnie sets up War Pigs, for instance, I think sounds super cool. He says something, there's always wars. We've always had war pigs. And it goes right into it, which I think is really cool. There's what was the other thing I was going to say about it? At the end of Paranoid, I don't know if you noticed this, but at the end of Paranoid, there's about 30 seconds where there's these guitar feedback noises and the crowd is going, and it reminds me of the end of Children of the Grave with like that woo. There's like these guitar feedbacks. I don't know if that's live or taped. And then they go into Children of the Grave and it just sounds so cool. So for me, I must have listened to this every day since this has come out, sometimes multiple times in a day. This has totally brought this album back to life for me. In fact, even some of the complaints that I had in the podcast about, and this is an often complaint with Live Evil in general, is Ronnie singing some of the Ozzy songs that maybe he just doesn't sound right singing some of the Ozzy stuff. But in this setting, it even works better for me. The mix makes it work better. I'm just appreciating this whole record. I feel way more energy off this album than I did off the original Live Evil. It reminds me of the first time I heard the Hammersmith release, where I was like, whoa, you really got to feel sort of the energy and everything that this band had live. And I think that really comes through great on here. Minor complaints. They put Iommi all the way in the right of the stereo spectrum, and there's not really anything to the left. It's like the bass, drums, and vocals are all centered. The keyboard, which when I was younger and had Live Evil, I saw Jeff Nichols listed. And the only time you really hear Jeff Nichols is when there's those very few times where there's keyboards in the songs, like in Heaven and Hell, for instance, just some very, very minor things. And I always thought, oh, he's just not doing anything most of the time. Well, when we got the Mob Rules Deluxe and it had that Portland show on it, I was shocked because the keyboards are like super loud in that Portland show. And Jeff Nichols is playing all the time, like even during the entire songs, he's playing constantly. I always thought, well, maybe he just comes in during the solos, but no, he plays a lot. Now, on the remixed version, you almost can't hear him at all. In fact, there's a little bit of keyboards in like the left stereo, but it's so low that it almost sounds like you can't hear what it's doing. And they even took him out. Like when Iommi is soloing in Heaven and Hell, there's all these cool little like choir sounding keyboard things that Jeff Nichols was doing that you can hear on the original Live Evil, that they totally took it out of the remix. And I have no idea why they, like, I can understand taking him out like from the Portland show where he's playing constantly, but why would you take that out there? So it's almost like they completely removed the keyboards. I wish they had just added a little bit more of the keyboards. Another very, very minor complaint at the very end of the concert, at the end of Children of the Grave, in the original, Ronnie does this good night, all at rest, good night, he goes, and that's the end of the show. For some reason, they took that out on the remix. That's not in there. It's like, why would you take that out? Also, me and you talked about this. Fluff is like really loud at the end of it, and that just sounds strange to me. It should have been sort of mixed down more. But again, those are minor complaints. I wish there was a little bit more keyboard. Maybe they could have moved Geezer's bass a little bit more to the left side of the stereo spectrum. But overall, this has just breathed totally new life into this album for me. I've just been absolutely loving it, man. This is, to me, maybe how this album should have always sounded. I'm just loving this remix. It's all about the remix in this box set for me. If you're on the fence about it, like Darin said, and you're a fan of this record, it's worth it, in my opinion, for the remix. The remix version is available on the streaming services as well as the remaster. Another complaint, I do feel like it's taking advantage of people putting the remaster and the remix together. If they had separated these, most of the people probably would have went with the remix. As it stands, I paid $99 for the box set. You're paying $99 for a book, a poster, the tour program, and for me, the remix. I'm probably never going to listen to this remaster, or barely listen to it. It's all about the remix for me.
Yeah, I did forget to mention about the stage banter. I think that really adds to the overall live album feel of it. And I love Dio's stage banter because it's never never really sounds rehearsed. It always sounds like it's impromptu, and I appreciate that. You seem pretty excited about it, and that's cool. I have at least 5 other bootlegs that may not sound quite as good, but they have better soundboard recording, and I would probably prefer to go to those, even though they are on CDR. I would go to those before I went to this version of Live Evil. Now, if you don't have those, or you're not aware of all the bootlegs from this tour, and you don't have one other live sets to choose from, maybe you might have the Hammersmith. I would even go with the Hammersmith over this. But when we're talking about this as it is, it's definitely an improvement. So it's a step in the right direction. But is it I guess it would have to be by default the be all end all, because most people don't, unless you're a real big Black Sabbath fan and you know people and you're part of the trading network, or you go online, or you have a place where you would get your Black Sabbath bootlegs. This is pretty much what you're going to get from the 1981 tour. But I got to say that there's a lot of better concerts that they could have chosen, and I'm pretty sure that they could have picked these. Well, again, I guess this kind of goes back to the origin of Live Evil, but there's a lot that are soundboard. So was it the band that was keeping track of these and recording these night after night, picking what they thought were the best performances? I think these are good performances. I don't think they're the best performances. I really do, and have always liked the version of Children of the Sea on Live Evil, but there are other ones in various other cities, soundboard recordings that are just as good, maybe better. So that, that's kind of unfortunate. But as it is, to take something that already exists, you can't erase it, but you can make it better. And that's what they did. And I think kudos for that. But as far as like being just dazzled by the way that Live Evil sounds in this boxed edition, I can't get that excited about it, because I've heard better. I've heard better performances, and I've heard better mixes. When you're talking about Jeff Nichols and he being very busy in the Portland show, well, that soundboard, whoever was doing the sound, had him jacked up,
Yeah,
through the board, and that's why that sounds that way. I don't know that they were able to do a remaster of that, or remix. I mean, I'm sure they remastered it. I don't think they could do a remix to the point where they could actually bring down the keyboard levels to a more respectable volume. But they probably worked with it as best they could in the remastering process. But yeah, it sounds odd, but I mean that's kind of typical of when you have these live recordings, and maybe it's the same guy night after night that travels with the band that does the soundboard. Probably not. So you're going to get different sounding live performances. You're going to get different sounding live versions depending on who's doing the soundboard and where they set the levels and so on and so forth. But being that this was, I'm assuming, engineered by the band at the time, it is a little curious why Jeff's keyboards are as low as they are, probably in the soundboard. But that's, I guess, the way they wanted it. And to represent them on this tour, I guess that's where they felt that Jeff should be placed. And that's fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've been reading some different forums, specifically the Steve Hoffman forum. For those who don't know, that's like an audiophile type of forum, and they're pretty many pages deep at this point with the Live Evil, with this box set. And there's been people commenting that, and this is known, that they did go into the studio, they did patch a lot of this up. Some people like you who are familiar with the shows that these were taken from have been able to comment on, like, oh, they're splicing together Ronnie's performances from different nights are sometimes spliced together into, verse one is from this night, the second verse is from another night. Same thing with some of Iommi's guitar solos. And some people have even commented, and I haven't gone this far in depth into it, that they're claiming that it sounds like there's even some different takes on this than from the original Live Evil. Like some of the guitar solos are slightly different. I haven't delved quite that deep into it, but it would be interesting to because they do list another little interesting thing. I believe it's at the very end of the book that comes in the box set. They list where each one of the songs came from. And I guess if you
Yeah.
wanted to, you could probably look it up on YouTube also. I'm sure those shows
I
are out there, and you could probably B it to the versions that are here on Live Evil, and probably hear where maybe, okay, they took a vocal take from another night, or they patched this up in the studio, or they did this. And let's face it, everybody does that with live albums. Everybody fixes things in the studio. To what extent, we don't know. The impression you get is that maybe this was kind of messed with a lot in the studio. But again, the remix for me makes it sound live. It gives it that sort of live feel that I think was really missing from the original. As much as I like the original, because it came out at a very important time for me, and being young, really into Black Sabbath at that time. And I think for a lot of other people too, Live Evil kind of has a special place in a lot of people's hearts. It was the first live Black Sabbath album that I ever had. I think that this does it justice, and I'm really happy with it. And it's surprisingly, I seem to enjoy the performances that I didn't care for. Like, for instance, the song Black Sabbath. I think that I enjoy the song much more now in this remix form. I wouldn't have thought that a mix could affect me the way that it did, but I just
yeah
seem to enjoy, like, NIB and Black Sabbath. I always liked Ronnie's version of Children of the Grave, but some of the Ozzy era songs just come across much better for me.
yeah, I will agree with
Better for me
that.
here.
I do. I don't mind the Ozzy era songs so much on the remix. There's something about it. Maybe it's because his voice isn't so it doesn't feel as isolated as it does with the original mix. I think now it's because everything seems more balanced. It's not putting the emphasis on the vocals as much, and you're hearing the vocals about as loud as you need to, but you're
Yeah.
also hearing the guitar in a better place, and the bass and drums and everything. So I think it does kind of temper. And I think we were both in agreement that we're really not crazy about Dio singing Ozzy. So I think that the remix does kind of temper that a bit, and that's good. No, I mean I really can't complain about what they did. I think if they're going to put a box together and they're going to put a $99 price tag to it. I think that they've tried to give the fans somewhat of a value. You get a lot of stuff. I mean, it's well done, and I don't think
Yeah.
it's something where wow, I really it says it's a remix, but I really can't tell. It's hard to
No,
tell.
you can
It's
tell. Yeah.
obvious as soon as you put
Yeah.
that on, and I don't know. I don't have any of these boxes on CD. I always buy the vinyl. Um, but as soon as I put it on, I could tell right away that it was
Oh
definitely
yeah.
sounded different. To your point about people on the Steve Hoffman board, and those guys are crazy. They get like they go down rabbit holes,
Yep.
and I've read some critiques about things that some people had problems with, and oh my god, wow, that's a stretch. So they get pretty carried away with some of their points. But um, when you said that somebody mentioned on the Steve Hoffman board about there could possibly be different takes, I suspected that. Either it sounds so improved or there's more detail through the remix, or they are in fact different takes. I didn't get into it. I just wanted to sit back and enjoy it. I want to listen to it maybe twice. So the first time I listened to it, I didn't want to really get too critical. I just wanted to sit back and enjoy it and just go with my first impressions, my instinct, and just try to not be too critical where I was over analyzing it. But even with that in that frame of mind, I still wait a minute. Is that even the same version that was on the original Live
Yeah.
Eat? It
I
sounds
had that
different.
reaction too.
And I haven't really investigated that, but it could very well be. So it'd be interesting to delve
Yeah.
into
I even thought
that.
like when Iommi is soloing in Heaven and Hell and the whole band drops out and it's just him by himself, I was like, wow, this sounds a lot like smoother. He sounds smoother, cleaner with his technique than I remember it sounding in the original. And on the when you're looking at it on streaming, the whole album is the remaster and the remix are all one thing there. So it's easy to sort of just click your finger and jump back and forth in B things. And I do believe it's the same. What they may have done is they may have added a little distortion or smoothed out his guitar sound or something like that. Because just to
Yep.
me, it's like on the original Live Evil, it's very like sort of choppy and a little harsh and trebly sounding. But here, and again, maybe this is just his original guitar sound. You're just hearing it clearer, or maybe
Could be.
they sort of added a little something to it to sort of smooth it out. And because even his guitar solo sounds better to my ears. And I had the same reaction. I was like, is this the same thing? Like, or is this a totally different, like similar but different? And I went and jumped back and forth in Apple Music between the two to see like, okay, it sounds like he's playing the same thing, but just the tone of the guitar
Yeah.
is just much better. And so it has a much more pleasing, sort of smoother sound to it. But I had that reaction a couple of times where I was like, is this the same, like, is this a totally different version? Because at times it really feels like it's a different. I had that same reaction in Mob Rules. I thought like, man, is this like this just sounds so much different to me. But so for those people out there who are wondering, it is on the streaming services and you can A/B it. You can listen to Mob Rules and the remix. You can listen to then immediately jump back to Mob Rules and the remaster, and you'll hear. And when you're doing that, when you're jumping back and forth between the two, I mean, it goes from the remaster, really big sounding, to the remix. I'm sorry, really big sounding, and then the remaster is just like everything sort of gets real claustrophobic and smaller sounding. So
Yeah.
for me, it's just the proof is that I've listened to this almost every day since it's come out, and sometimes multiple times. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm so glad that they did this because it always kind of stood as one of those. Uh, it was always a topic of discussion, the mix of Live Evil, and it was one of those things. Some people liked it, but it was always a topic of discussion. It also got me thinking, like, man, oh man, if they did this with Born Again, like how shocking could that could be another really like, whoa, just totally change perspective on the album, or it could make you think like, oh, maybe they should have left it alone. But so far, Live Evil, what they did with Live at Last in the Volume 4 box, I mean, it's totally breathed new life into these live records for me. And now I feel sort of like, all right, we've got a nice Dio era live album. We got a proper Live at Last, or that show probably should have been officially released by the band in the 70s. That would have been the proper, Ozzy live album. So I'm very happy with it. Price tag aside, if you're on the fence about it, I say get it. If you're a hardcore Sabbath fan, I just felt like I have to have this in my collection. So I'm excited about it. Was surprising it came out of nowhere. We weren't sure if we were going to get any more box sets. A little disappointing. I wish they could have put Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules inside the similar boxes, just so when I line them up on my shelf, it sort of looks cool and consistent. They just did them with, single, double vinyl type things. They weren't in a box, so to speak. So hopefully, I don't know, hopefully maybe, seems like there's a lot of excitement around this. A lot of people are talking about it and everything. So maybe this reignites the whole box set thing. Maybe it gets the box set thing sort of back on track and rolling again. One can only hope.
Yeah, I'd like to see a Sabbath Bloody Sabbath or a Master of Reality.
I want them all to
Box
come
set.
out. I want them all lined up in order on my shelf.
Well, I
It
don't
would
get
just
carried
like,
away now.
never say die. Give me
Carried
all of
away.
them, man. Give me all of them. We've
Yeah,
talked about that too at
don't hold your
length.
breath. Don't hold your breath.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's probably safe to say that this is going to kind of hopefully resurrect if what was the last box set they did? Was it Technical Ecstasy? Was it the last one they
Yeah,
did?
Technical
Yeah.
Ecstasy was the last one.
Yeah, maybe that kind of like sputtered out, but this might be enough to kind of resurrect the interest in the box sets, and maybe we'll get another one sooner than later this time.
I hope so. And as Darin and I are going to be doing a discussion on Geezer. Geezer just put out a book recently, within the last couple of days. Into the Void, it's called. And as I do with books like this, I tend to jump around. And since Live Evil was getting ready to come out, I'm going to read what Geezer has to say about Live Evil. And it's interesting in the book, he comments, he says, there's a new remix of Live Evil coming out in 2022. So this has apparently been sitting around since at least 2022.
Yeah.
So who knows what else they're sort of sitting on and just waiting for the right time to release. So, all right. Well, there's what me and Darin think of the new Live Evil box set. Let us know what you guys think. If you have it, let us know what you think. Give it a listen on the streaming services. If you're on the fence, tell us what you think of the remix. Make sure you check out my video on remixes and remasters. Make sure you check out our Into the Void of Black Sabbath podcast. You can hear us. We dedicate a whole episode to Live Evil. Let us know what you guys think down below, and we'll see you at the next Sabbath Sunday.